Me and Phil are building a luxurious pergola and we're going to show you how we did it at an affordable price.
And that is going to include the layout, installing the posts, and also installing the roof itself.
This looks mental! But before we start building our pergola, we need to start marking out where it's going, and what we need to do that with is using these stakes and a good old-fashioned string line.
So with our stakes and our string line, we can start setting out for the outside of our pergola. So this is going to be where the edges of the posts sit. So we actually run our stakes past where the edge of the building will sit. What that's going to allow is us to dig in the corners without having to move those stakes again. So they can stay there until all the posts are in place. And we square the lines up using a building square, and we also measure diagonally to make sure everything is as it should be. Right, that is all the setup done, so now we can look at our posts. So we're going to be using some 6x6 pine posts. The reason we're using such big posts is that's what gives us that luxury look. And I'm also going to be using these posts to take out some material here to put the roof inside. So we're going to notch this off, notch it out, notch all this out, and then this will actually sit in like that, flush. So to make our little recesses, we get a block, we mark the sides, and then we set our skill saw or our circular saw to the depth of that 6x2, and then we just run it through lots of lines, about 5 to 10 millimeters apart, and then we just mark the edge of where they stop with a chisel. Just makes it for a cleaner break when we smash out those little parts, and then we can just flat the area off with a chisel to make sure everything's going to sit nice and flush. And because this is a corner, we're doing that on two sides, so effectively you're removing an L shape, and it's the same process on the second one. Flat it off with your chisel, and if you want to go that little step extra, get yourself a block plate and flatten it completely off. That's our first post prepared. So we took the two corners out, and I'll show you what that's going to achieve. So our main beam that's going to hold our roof up can now sit within the post, and that's going to give it a lot more strength rather than bolting it to the side and relying on those fixings. That is all 4 corner posts prepared. So we've took the 2 sides off of 4, and now we've got 3 left. But with these last 3, because they're only in the front and the back, we're only going to do that to one side of the post, not 2. That is our post completely prepared. Now we can look at digging our first hole. So for us, it's pretty obvious where the high spot, because that's where we're going to be starting, is here. But if it isn't, if you just get a level and put it on your ground like so, and then if you lift it up, you can see that's still higher, and you can do the same the other direction. And again, we've got to lift it up, so that means this is the highest point. The reason we do that is because that's going to be the highest post, because that's where we're going to measure our pergola from. Now we know that is the highest point of the land, we can start digging our hole. So our holes are 600 millimeters deep, and we want to be about twice the width of the post we're putting in. So using some post hole diggers, we got to work, and we just moved the dirt to the lower section of ground, because this is actually getting covered up in a later video. Right, that is our first hole down to depth. Before we put our post in, we're actually going to be wrapping it in some post tape from Wolverstrong. So that's going to be our ground level there, and we need to wrap just above, and then we're going to stop just below, because posts don't actually rot down here, they rot where they come out of the soil itself. So to put it on, all we do is stick it, and then we're just going to wrap it all the way around. So it really is that simple to apply. Just wrap it around the post, make sure you rub it so it's all stuck, and then you can drop your post in, making sure that that tape just comes above ground level. So we plumb it up in both directions once it's in our hole, and then we can get ourselves some postcrete in. So fill it up with water, drop our bag in, give it a little prod, and that's just going to make sure it's fully mixed, and then we can drop in some more water and another bag. So we go with 3 with these bags because it is quite a large post. Spot on. And once it is spot on, we backfill the top and we can move on to our next post. So remember when I said about overrunning them lines? Now it becomes all clear. So we can actually move them out of the way, dig our hole using our post hole diggers, and then we can put those lines back every time without having to worry about where they are. So we drop in our next post, and to level everything up, we're measuring from our notch at the top, making a reference line using our laser and receiver, and setting every single post to that exact same mark. So that's going to make sure that this pergola is completely level. So when we put that roof on, it's going to look spot on.
That's all 4 corners set in. Now it's time to add 1 post at the back and 2 at the front.
So we decided on 7 posts when we come up with a plan for this pergola. Reason being is it's 4.8 meters wide, and you don't really want 6x2 spanning that wide with no support. So we put 1 in the middle at the back, but we didn't want 1 in the middle at the front because that's going to obscure your view as you come up to it. So we decided to go with 2 and create an actual entrance that you'd walk up and into this pergola area. So we marked off a 1200 opening. You could do whatever you like, but that's what we decided looked good, and that left about 1600 on the sides, including the posts. And we dug our holes, dropped it in, and then using that laser method, we got them completely level and got them concreted in so they were solid.
All of our posts are in. This will be our entrance. Now that that's all done, we can move on to the main beam that's going to be going around the top. Before we go cutting the main beam, which is this, down to length, I've created this little jig. So on the ends that are going to come past the posts, we've just done this little detail out of some scrap, and I'm going to run my route around it. What all it's doing is giving it a little bit of a fancier edge rather than just this boring square bit of timber. So I'll cut one out and I'll show you exactly how it's going to look up on the posts.
So to use the router method, you do have to make multiple passes because it hasn't really got the guts to go through all in one. You'll end up causing too much damage. So we did about 5 or 6 passes, chopped it out, and then after we just give it a little sand with the DA just to smooth off any of the marks that the cutter leaves, and it just gives for a nicer finish ready to be installed on the top of this pergola.
So I've cut the 2 side ones, the little design on the end, so Brad's going to chuck that up. So rather than a nasty square end, you've got that little pattern. We're not going to be doing the back because they're out of the way and hidden, but if you want to, you can. So we're going to do the same again coming across this way once we have half lap notched these, which I'm going to show you right now. So next job is to stick it into position, make sure we've got the correct overhang, and then using a scrap, I'm just going to sit that in that little cut out, and I'm going to mark down our piece of timber like so, and I'm also going to mark inside our post. And what this represents is the piece I'm going to be taking out of the top, which you will see in one moment. So I'm going to go round, do them all, and I'll see you in a minute. So I've marked out for our half lap. So basically what's going to be happening, this is a side. We're going to take our square and we're going to mark like so, exactly half the material, and we're going to remove the top half from the sides. And then on the back and the front, we're actually going to reverse that and remove the bottom half so they can slot over each other on that corner. And you will see exactly how that works in 1 millisecond.
So the method we chose to remove these notches is to run our circular saw through the timber as deep as we could get it, and then just hand saw down to that line because it doesn't quite cut halfway through this material. And then using a chisel, we just put a little line each side just to stop it blowing out when we come to smack it with our hammer, which you will see right now. Bang. And it just stops anything from getting damaged as you do that. And then using our chisel, take anything extra out, flat it off for a nice lap when we come to put them together. And that is what we left with. And then remember, when we're cutting these out, we are doing opposing sides. So it's not just the tops, we're doing the top
and then the bottom on the opposite ends.
We are taking a quick break. This is the perfect opportunity to thank our sponsors, HelloFresh.
The great thing about HelloFresh is these easy to follow recipe cards. So I'm going to do my best to make this exact picture.
There's hundreds of recipes to choose from kid-friendly, premium and street food and many more. And these meals are starting from just £3.15 per serving.
All the ingredients are super fresh and they are sent straight to your door, which is going to save you a bit of time shopping. I think we can agree that's a pretty good match. So if you want to get yourself 60% off on your first box and 20% off for the first 2 months and free desserts for life, hit the QR code below or go into the description and click that link. And now I need to get back to work.
With all of our notches cut, we can dry fit, which basically means we can put it together, but this isn't the final fit. All of that main beam. So make sure your half laps fit and they're all in the correct position. So we did the 2 sides first because they're notched at the top. So it needs to go in a particular order to put it all together. And then the back and front slots up and over that and locks it all into position. And after that I went round and done all the ends of the rest of the rafters ready for when we install those.
What I'm doing now is I'm going to set up some of these rafters with some clamps and I'm going to put my half laps, so my notches, in 3 or 4 at once. So a little tip just to save a bit of time rather than doing 1 at a time. So I think my clamp will get about 3 or 4. I'll let you know in a minute. Oh, 4, Mike, 4. This is exciting news. Yeah, this is exciting stuff. And the main thing you need to be doing with these, oh, one moment, is making sure that front edge is exactly flush all the way through. And now we can mark out for where we're putting our half laps, which is going to be the span from this main beam that we put in a little bit earlier. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to mark my overhang for the front, which we've already got the measurement for, and I'm going to bring that up on top and mark out for the actual notch itself. And now that we've got our overhang mark, I'm just going to use a scrap to mark the back, and then I'll use my square again off that same shoulder to mark them out. So what we're going to do, we're going to remove this, but we're going to run our saw through in 1 pass. So we're going to do 4 rather than 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So we're going to do the same on the back.
So to do this method, cutting multiple at once, is the same process as doing 1. So we run our skill saw through at full depth, and then we use our hand saw to cut down to the marks that we've made for the complete depth, making sure you keep that hand saw nice and square, and then we can knock out those little blocks and then use our chisel to completely flat off the openings, ready to go.
That is it. The ring beam is now in place for now, and then now it's time to install some knee braces. And what a knee brace is one of these. And it has a purpose. It's actually to help with the structure to make it more rigid. It's like that, and we're going to show you how we made it.
And when Brad says we, he actually means me. So to make our knee braces, we decide on the length we want, and then we put our 45-degree angles onto the ends. But we're not going to be cutting all the way through those marks. We're actually only going 1/3 the thickness of the material on both sides. So using our depth stop on our saw, we chop lots of lines into the knee braces so that we can knock them out with our mallet, and then use our chisel to flat off the tenons that we are creating. So that's what this little part is here. It's called a tenon. So we've marked out our tenons at 90mm, but later on we decide that's a bit too much, and we actually drop them back to 60mm. So as long as your tenon is 1/3 the depth of your style, so that highest point 150, so ours would be 50mm, we ended up at 60, then you're all good. And it's the same for the thickness, so 1/3 the thickness, and that is our tenon created. And then we decide to shorten it down on the shoulders. So that what that's going to give us is a little bit of wiggle room when we come to install them. Because timber is a natural product, it's very hard to get exact sizes on your posts and your rails, because everything's moving every day, something's changed ever so slightly. So them little shoulders just give you some wiggle room. And then we decided to add a curve to the bottom. So to do that, we got some composite that we had laying around, bent a little curve into it, and then used our jigsaw to cut it. And as you can see, with a jigsaw, the blade flexes. So we then run our router along it to square up that edge like so. And then we just smoothed it off with our DA, and that is how you create a knee brace.
That is all the knee braces prepped, prepared and ready to go into our frame. Our next job is marking them out on the frame. So we have 12 total to go onto our frame, and how we're going to do this, we're actually going to offer them up to our frame, and we're going to get the 45-degree angles perfectly aligned, and then we're actually going to mark our tenons onto our frame, giving us a reference point for Mortise. Also, a little top tip is to make sure that you number each one, because the timbers might have slight variation in each individual one. Now that we've got that all marked out, we're going to remove the ring beam and start installing the mortise.
We're going to be cutting the mortises.
Cutting the mortise.
Talking about the mortises, so this is our tenon, and we've actually shortened these down slightly because of the method we're going to be cutting our mortises with. So rather than a 90mm tenon, we've shortened it down to 60. As long as it's over a third of the style thickness, so this way here, which ours still is, and a third thickness, so this is split into equal threes. And then we're going to be showing you how we make these little pockets like so. So let's get this down and then we'll show you the method we're using.
And what I'm doing, I'm having to remove it in a certain sequence because they've all got half lap on.
Half lap joints. Just right on that one quick.
Yeah. Turn around and tell them what you did that for, Phil.
Oh, because that goes there, I've written left because these are identical. And because everything fits so well, I don't want to risk moving it, and that might be a 2mm difference. So I'm just going to mark left on there, and then I'm going to write left on the back one. All the rest are different. That way we won't get confused when we put it back together.
I just want to do a massive shout out in this video to MGN Building Merchants for supplying all this material. If you're in the London or Essex area and you're looking for any building materials, give them a shout. The link is in the description below.
Right, now that we've got that main beam down, we can transfer the marks that Brad made. So when he put the knee braces on and marked the sides of the tenons. So I'm just going to use a little speed square, combination square. And then we can just transfer the marks like so. And then what I'm also going to be doing is adding a little 15mm mark here. And that will all come clear in 2 minutes. So I'm just going to do that. So I'm going to go through, mark them all. There should be 2 on each. So the method I have come up with is using a trend mortise jig. So this is normally for locks that you put in doors. We found a plate that is going to give us the correct thickness. It's a bit short, but we can just shuffle it down. And that 15mm mark that I made is going to take into account for the bush that we're using, which is 10mm, and I'm also adding 5mm to the mortise just to give us a little bit of play so it ain't super tight. And just remember, any of the tools that we do use in our videos will always be listed in the description below. Let's get this thing plunged in and cut this mortise out.
So just like when we did the pattern on the end of our rafters, we do this in multiple passes. It just saves the cutting end and stops it from getting damaged. So a few different passes and you're all the way down to depth.
And then, because of what I explained, because this plate is too short but it's the correct width, we could just shuffle that down to our second mark, which is there. And then we can tighten it back up and just extend that mortise that we've made. And you might have noticed that when I take this out, I always make sure that it's not spinning anymore, because if it's spinning with this size of bit, it never goes back inside the base. So you don't want to catch that on there. You'll ruin your bit, you'll ruin your jig. So just take your time.
So that is what we're left with using this little method, a super clean mortise. So we can take our tenon and see what we're dealing with. Fingers crossed, otherwise I look like an idiot. Oh, spot on. Now we're going to do the other 9 we need to cut. So having all of the timbers set up on the trestles just makes this a lot easier and a lot faster. So it worked out there was 2 mortises per length, and some are on the bottom, some are on the top, all depending on how those half laps were cut out, and that's what we ended up with. Perfect. This is Phil reporting live from the UK. The weather has took a turn for the worst and we are facing precipitation once again in the middle of summer. So I'll see you very soon. No, it is not the next day. It is 3 minutes later and the sun has come out. So we do get all seasons in one day. So our next job, now that we've cut out all of our mortises on the actual beam above, is to cut them out on the posts themselves. So the marks that Brad put there, I'm going to use those to scribe a line using my combination square, and that is going to set the depth. So what that represents is that little shoulder there, and then we need to cut out here. So I'm going to go around and do that on all the posts. So that's our first pass done. So what we need to do is move the guide over slightly because it needs to be a little bit wider than that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to go around and do the first pass on every post. That way I haven't got to set this up more than once. And then I'll adjust the fence and I'll go around the whole lot all over again. So this method works out perfectly for a nice mortise. What I will say is that router is very heavy when you're holding it against a post like this. So you do need to have a bit of muscles when you're using it like this, but if you can bear that, it works perfectly. And now that all our mortises are done, we can put that top ring beam on for a final time. But when we do this, we have to put those knee braces in at the same time. So we do the 2 sides and the 2 knee braces, and then with that in, we can then move on to the front piece. Again, 2 braces have to go in at the same time. Now, these braces might be moving a little bit because we have allowed 5mm back and forth, remember, but that's not a problem. You'll see how we get over that in a little while. So remember, 2 sides, then the back, then the front. And you'll also notice there's a little gap between that top plate there. I'm also going to show you how we fix that. Because it is natural timber, it does move, and this is what I was saying. Every day you put this together, something would have moved where the moisture is escaping from the timber. So the posts might have twisted slightly, they might have shrunk slightly, but it's not a big deal. We can get over everything. So we carry on getting the last of these installed using a rubber mallet. We're not using an actual hammer. We don't want to put dents in our timber. Knock them all into place, ready for that next step. Now that that's done, we get our corners fixed using timber locks. We're only doing the corners at this stage just to pull them tight to our posts. And once that's done, then we can start looking at the movement that we've had. So that gap in the middle, when we first did that, that was perfectly tight. Because the timber's moved, we've got a gap. So we use a ratchet strap, and as you can see, that gap closes up nice and easy, not a lot of pressure there. Just pulls everything tight, and then we can put our fixings into those posts to hold it forever. With the front all done, we could do exactly the same on the back. So the whole thing's slightly moved, so we just pull it in and get our fixings in. When it comes to the dowels that we're going to be putting through our tenons, like them over there, what we're going to be doing is using a 21mm Forstner. You tell me what it actually is, put it in the comments. So anyways, I'm going to be drilling through, and what I've done is I'm coming up 40mm off the bottom of our brace and then 80mm between the two, making sure that we're hitting that tenon that's inside here. So we're just going to drill through. Right after I put my goggles on. They're on my head. And then we take our length of dowel, cut it down into manageable pieces, and then we just tap them in.
That's how we're going to leave it, Phil.
There's a hand. Perfect.
Washing line as well.
Yeah. You want to leave a little bit extra to add for the effect of it all. And then we're just going to cut them down. I'm just going to use a scrap. This is that template we made earlier. So I'm just going to put that and then cut through. And don't put your hands underneath. Don't know why I'm doing that. And we're going to do the same on the top. Now that the ones in the post are done, I'm going to do the top on this plate here, but these ones go all the way through. We're only going 100mm into these ones. So it's same process, same measurements. The only thing we did do different was to cut our dowels down. Obviously, we're not going to be using a full rod every time. That was just a bit of banter. So we cut down little 100mm bits, rounded the ends. It's just going to prevent it blowing out the timber when we put them in. Punch them through, and then using that little bit of scrap, we cut them all down and then use the DA to round off the ends. We're going to carry on putting the rest of these in, and I'm going to move that strap as I go just to make sure these are nice and tight as we put those pins in. And then
we get to actually start installing the rafters, and this thing will start to come together. Now it's time to install our rafters. Just remember, if you're enjoying these videos, make sure you hit the subscribe buttons. It keeps me and Phil making awesome videos like this. Our next job is to measure the distance. We've got 9 rafters, so we're going to divide it equally between the spaces.
Now that Brad's mumbled and stumbled through that, I can explain exactly what we're doing. So we've got 9 rafters. We take the space between the 2 that are already installed, and because we've got 9 rafters going in, we divide it by 10. So we basically want an equal setup on our rafters. The reason we need to do this is because we're doing those half laps. So we're notching the top of this main beam out. So we use our combination square, mark the depth just like we did the others, and then we run the skill saw through as max depth as we can get, and we move onto the hand saw to get down to full depth before punching them out using our rubber mallet. So what this is going to give us is a completely flush roof when we put these in. You don't have to do this, you can have them sat on top, but the look I was going for, I wanted everything to sit nice and flush when it's put together, just to give it that little bit extra wow. Now all of our notches are done, we can start sliding our rafters into position. Oh, well, that was lucky. Oh, I'm going to need a hammer on that bad boy. Nice tight fit, and that's what we want. So we're going to get the rest in, and stay tuned because there is a final detail we're going to be putting in this pergola that's going to make it extra special. So when we are installing these rafters, remember I said about it being a natural product. Even though we've measured everything to the millimetre, these timbers can twist and turn, so sometimes you need to get a block of wood like you see me doing here and absolutely hammer it to get it to fit. So the building is square, but sometimes the wood twists and it just makes it super tight to get in. But once it is in, it's never coming out, and that's what we want. We want to build it to last. Once everything's knocked into position, we use some timber locks through that half lap. And the reason we're doing that is, if anyone ever decided to put a roof on this, it'd become like a massive sail. So we want it locked down, and then we can move on to that final detail that we were talking about, and that is a stop chamfer. So what that is, a 45-degree cut on the corner of the post that stops wherever you want it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Keep an eye out next week where we'll be building a deck.
Love you, bye.
He's off again, every time.